Ну что ж, всем привет. Я начинаю проходить The First Free. Не знаю даже, что это за игрушка. Лисенок вот стоит. Здесь вы мышку должны уже видеть. А может быть и нет. Так, сразу посмотрим настройки. Конный режим кинотеатра не надо. Субтитры пускай будут. Не знаю, что тут. Чувствительность мыши, сглаживание off. Ну, пускай. Так, назад. Новая игра. Погнали. Так, аккуратно провод протяну. Вот так вот. Мы спим. Ясно. Так. Ага. Ну, типа, я смотрю за лисенка.
Are you awake? I thought I heard you get up.
Yeah, I'm awake. Sorry, I just can't sleep.
Так, простите.
Are you thinking about him?
Yeah, a bit. Usually get back to sleep, my love. I'm fine.
No, it's okay. What else is on your mind?
I don't know, it seems weird, but I had one of the most vivid dreams of my life. I saw a fox on a snowy mountain, just looking confused and worried. Those eyes. I can't get those eyes out of my head. She was running in the windy
такие
snow,
глаза точно
looking
ничего
for
не
something.
Do you think it has to do with you and what's been going on?
I don't know. It was just a dream, Rachel. They're not meant to make sense. A lot's happened the past couple days, that's all.
Well, if you're not going to sleep anyway, you should tell me.
Прыжок.
I want to
Ох,
hear.
ничего себе, двойной прыжок.
Alright.
Так, ладно, допустим. Тут есть мини-карта? Ну да, можно рисунок. Не понял, а что нам тут хотели? Допустим, я могу... ага, я могу бегать. У меня есть двойной прыжок. Что еще могу? Вроде как лапками не реагирует, когда мышкой кликаю. А в этой игре есть цель? Что-нибудь? Что, просто побегать с лисенком? Окей. Почему столько много травы? Раз мы тут столько снега. Опа, это что такое? Ой, маленький
So,
лисенок.
not far from her home, she followed that path to something unexpected.
Живой? Нет? Грустно как-то. Ага.
She couldn't stay, though. She had to find her other two children. So she took that path. She followed it towards something ancient, something with
кинотеатр разбежать?
answers.
Да ладно, это все пробегать надо будет. Ай. Чё? Дождик? Весна?
The fox looked high and low, searching for any sign of her cubs.
Это след вот этот белый, да?
Points of light showed the way to this ancient tree.
Ага, их надо еще
It was as if each one had a story to tell, all their own.
Казалось, мне кажется,
The land was trying to tell my story too.
Блин, надо и
I
играть,
felt like
и
I was right
читать.
behind her the whole time.
Мне казалось, что я бегу вместе с ней. Эх, ничего себе, а огоньки-то тут за километр. Значит, там такие зайцы. Что это? Кролики? Здорово, блядь. Так, ну лиса, короче, не ест ничего. Она... Так, дышит. Так, ну птица. У лисы кто? Ой, как она называется? Зайцы... Короче, лиса ест зайца. А лисуху ест, если так, коршун? Волк? А, ну это не так так. Где-то там сверкает, там сверкает, там сверкает. Ну, она не выдыхается, если хочешь такого. Здрасте. Не понял. Здесь что, пусто? А, ну прыгает она тоже прикольно. Тень я как будто играю, блин, за белку переростка. Ну ладно. А, это вот веселый, это лежит. Нет. Чё это?
As a kid, did you ever do show and tell in your class?
Yeah, I think I only did it once when I was in the 4th grade.
Чё это такое, мясо?
You know how my life was
А,
around
нет.
then.
Стоп, какое мясо?
I wanted to show my
Кораблик?
class what helped pass the time and distracted me. So I brought a dozen paper cranes I had made. I think I told everyone how badly I wanted to be a bird and fly, embarrassingly enough.
Don't be embarrassed. Every kid wants to fly. For me, it was another toy from my dad, a wooden boat. I remember guarding it so carefully in my hands as I walked into class. When I sat down, a group of boys immediately made fun of it.
А зачем мне их
They
собирать?
asked which trash can I found it in, or why an ugly log was my favorite toy. When I got up, I didn't even want to tell them my dad had carved it. I said it was a joke gift my friend had given me.
Вон самолетик, пожалуйста.
Kids can be so cruel.
Some of them are. I shouldn't have let them get to me, but it did. It's amazing we bounced back at all.
Вон там что-то еще можно найти. Нет, прикольно так. А, тоже что-то.
Do you remember what my dad did for a living?
Wasn't he like a lumberjack?
Леса.
That's one way of putting it. If wood was a canvas,
Ну, а тут
and a carving knife was his
паровозик
paintbrush.
вагон.
Even after working a 50-hour week, even after his hands were more splinters than skin, he would bring home the nicest piece of Alaskan weeping cedar and make me toys. That wooden train was the first toy I can remember, and I
Ну,
loved it.
прикольно, там даже следы остаются.
I just knew from a
I
young
know.
age I was going to be a lumberjack, like my father.
Ничего не понимаю. Причем тут вот эти болтающие. Он увидел типа сны. Тут надо останавливаться, наверное, и читать то, что они говорят. Прикольно так сделано. Да? Свечение, тень. Блин, огонь. Еще вон туда нас бегать. Ух ты. Я думал, все. Уже почти конец тут этой локации. А тут и вон. Туда еще. И, а тут еще что-то рассказывал.
Usually those
I'm a
kids
bit
would leave me alone,
Чего?
but
Это
somehow they
там?
could tell I was different. They made fun of how far away I lived. They called my dad a sourdough. I was a blabbermouth as a kid. Telling my dad stories I made up for hours. But after that show and tell, I didn't tell him much anymore. He didn't know exactly what was wrong, but his best guess was that the toys he carved weren't cool enough.
Блин, самостоятельно
He carved me a
вырез.
tank
Там.
and tried to tell me what it was like to be in a
Сказать,
real
что не
tank as a
понравилось.
serviceman.
Это
I
уже-
didn't know your dad was in the military.
Yeah, in the army. The sad thing is that I'd pretty much forgotten until just now. There's so much I still don't know about him.
Об отце не
I'm
говори.
sorry. He knows how much you love him. You're going to see him again soon and have some closure, I'm sure.
Там где-то искрило, просто я бегу туда. Можно было сразу наверх. бежать, наверное. А, я разве эту кухню что-то? Так, а это что? Что за ерунда? Кто потерял? Ага, я так понимаю, тут даже все расставили. Офигеть. То есть тут в лесу тоже никто не обижает, все нормально, да? И леса никого не обижает. Ни кроликов, ни зайцев. Так, допустим. Я вот там сверху что-то пропустил, да? Не так пошел. Ясно. Да тут огроменная локация будет. Чего такое? У тебя двойной прыжок есть. Ты вообще бесголоважный будешь. А там какая пропустила благонька. Типа. Я их смогу забрать, только не упав со скалы. Будет великолепно. Двойной прыжок, вообще прыжок не сработал. А, она бессмертна? Ух ты. Я узнал все. Начинать сначала. А сейчас работает постоянно, ты что? Серьезно? Не всегда работает. Почему? Не потому что я не прикоснулся к земле, как надо. Блин, лучше бы уже упал бы с этой скалы, но взял бы эту штуку. О. Да. Да задолбал уже тут дождик. Какой нафиг дождик? Жуком я тут ничего не выиграю. Бог, как будто она быстрее становится. Так, а тут что мы откопаем?
The older I got, the more I withdrew.
Рисунок.
I asked myself, why talk to anybody anyway? Why bother when I'm happy by myself? I started drawing a lot, mostly animals I saw in the woods by my home. I then imagined designing my own hideouts with things like TVs and pantries full of chips and cookies. I think that idea of leaving home and drawing blueprints started my career. I found a lot of solace in that.
I'm not
Рисовать
surprised,
чертежи меня
but I did the
интересует
same
только
thing,
там.
you know? There's something
Ну, рисуй,
special about
рисуй.
having a place to call your own.
And now
Oh.
look at us. Well,
Здорово.
you count renting in an overpriced city.
Я сюда потом возвращаться не буду.
It's as close as we can get for now.
Все, я дальше побегу тогда. Да? Чё, в смысле? Ок. Опа. Лето. Еще ярче. Вот теперь я как будто в слайме. Такое же прям небо прикольное. Интересно, разработчик не один и тот же. Да, кстати, вышел Slime Rancher 2. Я пока что не буду открывать. Но из-за того, что в Steam для меня оно недоступно для покупки, я не могу поиграть в Slime Rancher 2 и также не могу вам показать его. Что это? Epic Game? Epic Game, да? Там оно стоит в 2 раза... Ну, где в 2? Ну, надо 100-200 рублей дороже. Я, конечно, также бы взял лучше бы и в Эпике. Даже дороже. Ничего. Может, она потом подорожает, когда выйдет из раннего доступа. Но тут есть одно но. И в Эпике я почему-то не могу теперь покупать. Я думал, только Steam закрыл для России покупки игр. Ключей для Slime Rancher я тоже больно сейчас не нахожу. Ни на Зака и на Steam Buy. Не знаю. Может быть, потом поступят они, я сразу же куплю их.
My teenage years were full of sketching, angst,
Подростком я
and trouble.
сомневаюсь.
I wasn't popular or
Искал
unpopular.
неприятности.
Maybe
Ага.
just forgettable. I guess that gave me a sense of freedom. So I hung out with crazy kids, doing crazy things, even though I mostly just watched the chaos ensue. We did it all. Put fireworks in mailboxes, hide roadkill in people's garages, break windows of the barber shop in Anchorage. My dad was furious, but he was so busy working he couldn't do much to stop me from going out.
I think being an adult means there's no one to stop you making hard decisions. He had to make a living, and he couldn't be in two places at once.
А,
Yeah,
тут
I
вообще целый
realize that
письменный
now.
стол, да?
But at the time, I was sure he was more interested in growing his
Yeah.
business than what was going on with me. He
Ищет
was
такой
working
ключи.
another late night,
Ключи.
and my friends were over, saying how bored they were and how they had come all the way out to my house for nothing. One of them mentioned how that old, ugly beyond belief truck was still in the garage, and how we should take it for a spin. I was only 15, so I kind of fought it for a while. The next thing I knew, we were careening around the mountain path, rocks spitting onto the sides of the cliff, while my dad's cringeworthy bluegrass blared out the speakers.
Ого, там что-то фиолетовое.
I drove while my friends were in the back of that yellow and purple truck, throwing beer bottles and trash at anything remotely interesting. Felt like I was soaring in the air with borrowed wings. But all good things have endings. A cop outside of Eagle River pulled us over after he saw us send a bottle rocket into someone's
А,
yard.
это бабочки. Чего?
What followed was a long night of talking to disappointed adults
В смысле?
and feeling smaller than ever.
Так, допустим. Бабочки мне нужны? Мне их надо собрать, с собой тащить куда-то? Ну... Блин, ну пошлите. Я не знаю, как вы... Видите? Так, один прыжок... Ага, прыжок... А, они мне дают плюс прыжку. Стой, 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 стой. Ну, пошлите. А, здесь все равно прыгать, да, придется? Или это как раз для того, чтобы я здесь запрыгнул? Блин. Эй, чё? А нафига мне бабочки тогда, если я без них могу? Ладно. Ну, прикольно то, что они еще плюс дают. Наверное, пока это еще вводное, так сказать. Зараза. Ты где еще два твоих лисенка, а? Ты куда там смотрел? Ага, водопад, вулкан. Ой, гейзер. Зашибись нафиг. Проехались. А, я его красить могу? А, это просто вот. Мне вот ради этих штучек надо прыгать, не знаю куда. Ну ладно, давай, ради интереса. А пойдемте еще раз. Ну пойдемте. Одного прыжка хватает. Сейчас не хватило. Третий раз. Мне нужна эта звездочка. Не знаю зачем. Опять. Здорово. 5-й раз. 24-й не срослось. Ай, кошмар. Если они не нужны, я даже их собирать не буду. Во, собрал. Все, я доволен. Я так и буду раскапывать, что ли?
After he drove me home from the police station, I blew up at him, saying how I never wanted to be like him, how I was gonna be someone and leave that hick icebox for good. He just looked forward at the road with tired eyes. I took out that bluegrass tape from the cassette deck and chucked it out the window. In my sage teenage wisdom, I thought I had proved the ultimate point. But my dad had a different idea. He slammed the brakes, slowly bowed his head while gripping the steering wheel, and finally looked at me. All he said, like it was a polite request, was, "Make this right." I sat there in silence, fuming, but I eventually got out and combed every square inch of the woods, muttering profanity after profanity.
Ну там
I
машина.
found it 30 minutes later, near a small waterfall off the road. I went back to the truck, put the wet tape back in, and sure enough it worked. We didn't speak another word to each other the rest of the night.
Wow, I knew you were a crazy teenager, but
It's hard to believe, isn't it? Surprises me too. It's like I
Yeah,
didn't
so
really
what
know
was
who
that
that kid was back then.
А, как ж,
I bet my dad thought the same thing over and
пожалуйста.
over.
Шо?
It's almost like he was saying,
Ложишься.
make this right to himself, more than to me.
Ага. Давай, 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 давай. Ну, малыш. Да, е. Нафиг нам гора. Мы сами себе гору построили. Я ради этих 2 звездочек сейчас минуту убивал. Все, давай. Хату. И вперед погнали за 10-м. В чем смысл игры-то хотя бы? 10 найти. Бабочка. Ой. Так, бабочка. Окей. И там бабочка. Тут есть водопад, и почему-то вся вода туда уходит. Ну, так как я вижу, он там снизу пар, испарение идет, то, я так понимаю, в эту воду лучше мне не идти. А, в смысле? Или в воду. А, водопад. Зачем мне там давали? Там тут есть? Не собрал? Главное, вот еще есть бабочка. Ничего. Там еще что есть? Как вы зараза приныкали. Зачем я их собираю? Ну. Так, а вторую я уже пару не соберу, да? Мне повезло, как говорится, ладно. Там оно для чего? Ну, тут по-любому надо. А мне кажется, за бабочки мало будет. 3 бабочки плюс 2 прыжка. Ух, ничего себе, 3 бабочки. Это первая там. Первая получается там, так ведь? Потому что там прыгать надо. Здесь я могу без прыжка залезть? Ну-ка. 3 бабочки плюс 2 прыжка. Ну. Ну вот, допустим, раз. Все улетели туда? В смысле, блин? Куда вы там делись? Не понял. А. Вот. Но он там точно прыгать надо. Да, здесь я сейчас их все растеряю, потому что не прожил. Ясно. Без прыжка я тут ничего не сделал, да? Да. Я тут только застрял. Ладно, давай. Ну что ты такое? Первое. Использовать нельзя. Бежали. А чтобы на камушек забраться, нужно вот на этот камушек забраться. Ай, нет, не камень, это валун. Так, 3 бабочки. Нахрена столько бабочек. Смотри, не съешь одну. Сама побежишь.
My friends would laugh about that night and talk about how crazy it was. And I laughed along, pretending it didn't bother me. But it did. I imagined my friends growing old in the bush, unable to find that thrill in those godforsaken ice fields. It's like those mountains were a literal wall, keeping me from leaving, where all I would have to look forward to are lumber yards and evening beers. I had to climb over. That was my only goal for a long time.
Да ладно. Вы чё, шутите, что ли? Стоять. Ой, светло-то как. Лисенок? А, сейчас. Ну,
If there was some way I could take my love of drawing and turn it into a way of escape, nothing would make me happier. I wanted to create instead of tearing trees down. I wanted to move to the lower 48, not because I hated it there in Alaska, but I hated the idea of it. It's like all of that spite inside me had created this monster which followed me around my whole teenage years. I put so much energy into doing what others didn't expect of me. Why did I do that?
не, серьезно,
There's
никуда.
one fact you're forgetting, though. If you didn't have that fire in you, we probably would have never met.
You're absolutely right.
Не, просто по
Maybe
приколу
the
сбегаю в
destination
одну
is all that matters in the end.
точку. Горячую точку.
But then why am I awake? Why am I seeing this fox go on her journey?
Спасибо большое.
And why can't I
Чё, в
stop
смысле,
thinking
куда?
about my
Я
dad?
же не добежал. А, ладно. Раз это... Вау. Да ладно. Чё тут как красиво-то? Вон там. Отличительный знак. Это. Куда мне бежать? Что это такое? Матрас. Так. Надо понять, мне нужны эти звездочки или нет. Ну-ка, что тут? Оконный режим. Комментариев. Что значит каких комментариев? Блин, а я откуда узнал?
Almost all stories follow the same kind of structure. And it starts with an inciting
Спасибо,
event,
блин.
and then there's rising action, and then there's a climax, and then there's falling action. And it's actually really difficult to make an interesting story where you only hear these two people talking, and it's spoken through a dream that's already happened. And the most of the action is about this animal that isn't directly related to this couple at all. So I don't know what I was thinking, but my hope was that it would create some interesting things and connections that I didn't see before. And that was kind of the whole exercise of making the first tree.
хотя бы перевод бы сделали. Также с субтитрами. Чё это? Нафиг ты мне булыжник отключаешь? В смысле? Чё надо? Ага, взаимодействие также на Е. Чё мне оно дает-то? В чем прикол? Один из трех. Окей, я понял, на этой локации еще две штуки такие вот камушка должны быть, да? А объясните, что это хотя бы? Или вот в комментарии надо как раз вот то, что там аудиозапись была, и там надо расшифровывать, да? Чё это? Чё за ерунда? О, деревушка. Нет, царь. Где не висят? Ну вот,
On our property, there were old abandoned pieces of a shed and car long left unused. I used to ask him all the time who those people were that left all this junk. I'm sure he got so tired of hearing it that he made up some elaborate stories how a brown bear ate them and haunted the woods afterwards. What's funny is I think it made those people seem more real. Growing up thinking they were still hanging out like they couldn't say goodbye. I used to tell my friends how I could swear I saw spirits move near the water, and that always freaked them out. I guess it didn't bother me, because the way I saw it, they were normal people with old cars and sheds, just trying to figure out how to survive and be happy in the middle of nowhere. It was a cool thought that they didn't want to leave, but you know, I was a weird kid.
Well, you had good company since those ghosts like living in a place where they were brutally devoured.
Это из-за комментариев столько вот этих белых отметин на появилось, да? Пятьдесят стакс. Так, это просто для достижений я собираюсь? Серьезно? Зачем они нужны? Реально для звездочка, ну. А, Shift F3, что ли? Смотрим. 100, 150 звездочек. Ой. Из достижений тут бегать по всей карте, собирать эти звездочки. Глупость какая. Ага, вижу еще один обелиск. И еще одну запись.
I don't think the first tree could work at all without the music by Josh Kramer. And his music, it's actually publicly available to license, and so it was affordable for me since this was a hobby project. And it's something I like to tell new indie developers all the time, like, you can't afford that composer, you can't afford a full-time programmer. You need to cut corners and finish your game, and the way to do that is to use these amazing publicly available assets that anyone can purchase and license. And so his music is incredible, and I actually haven't talked to him that much, I've just emailed him. But his music was nominated for Most Emotional Music at the Emotional Game Awards in France, and he's just a really nice guy. And I think there's so much amazing content out there that if you're thinking of making a game, like, look around and see what you can make work on a tight budget, because it worked really well for the first tree.
Even at my most distant, at the times when I detested him the most, he kept reaching out. For a year straight, he asked me every week when we were going camping. I thought he was just dense. Eventually, to shut him up, I agreed. We carried out the worn lawn chairs from the garage and set up a cinder block campfire at the site we'd always used behind the house. We walked down the mountain path, talking in the warm sunshine we only got a couple months of the year. Those 3 obsidian rocks shimmered alongside the shore, almost like sparklers pressed against a dark window. I'll never forget that wet stone on my feet, or how those massive mountains looked even bigger in the lake's reflection. I felt small, but grateful. As the sun set, my dad found something I hadn't seen for a long time. The tree where I'd made my first carving when I was 6. I hadn't even carved it. My dad had helped me, but I still called it my tree. Something about seeing my name there made me open up, and we talked about everything that night in that old camouflage tent. I told him how much I loved sketching and design, and how it would be a dream to study architecture in Seattle. I told him how I didn't get along with my friends much anymore, but that I didn't mind being alone. He told me he was there for me, and he joked that if all he had to do was write my name on a tree to finally get me to talk, he would have left me carved logs with novels on them in front of my room every morning. I don't know why it took me that long to realize it, but it was then I knew how much he had sacrificed for me.
I did want to do something a little different with this level. I wanted it to be more open world feel, and that there was something blocking your progress, so it did encourage people to look closely and see how to unlock this blocked way. And I do like just walking around this level and listening to the beautiful music by Josh Kramer. His work really sets the mood for the whole game.
My dad built a lot of stuff in his free time. If he wasn't watching fly fishing or reading Tom Clancy novels, he was carving something. He made tons of birdhouses. Not that he was into bird watching, but I think he really missed working and adding on to the home. If he couldn't afford the time to build onto our own house, he would have to settle with watching birds move into their little homes. We kept an old mattress in the bed of that ugly yellow truck, so we would drive it deep into the woods and then watch the birds fly into their houses while the sun set. Usually it was accompanied by venison jerky or a cold Coke, but not a lot of talking, which is how we both liked it.
Earlier I said I just love going through video games and exploring, like looking at every nook and cranny and just trying to find little details. And I think that started because in middle school and high school, I would make mods for my favorite games, namely Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, and Far Cry. And I loved like this huge world of mod makers who would make these levels, and it'd be like the most random creative things, and I would just love exploring, usually multiplayer levels, by myself. So even though I went to college for film, before that, like before high school, I was making video games and mods, and it was my favorite thing in the world. I made a ton of different levels. I made an abandoned space hotel with a dance floor and cafeteria. I made a haunted campground with cabins and tents. I made this whole city with like the first ever day-night cycle with running showers and stuff in the hotel and the apartment buildings. And I just loved making those mods. And I think that carries over to my game, The First Tree, and also the one before that, Home is Where One Starts, which is it's exploration. You're just looking around and appreciating the details.
We were happiest underneath the evergreens. We decided it was time to finally map out the hundreds of acres we lived on, just to pass the time during the summer. He was only free in the evenings, so I would spend the day wasting time on dial-up internet and sketching, and then we would rush into the woods, pen and map in hand, before evening fell. Sometimes, the aurora borealis would cast a cold green glow on the mountainside, and we would finish our route underneath a twilight sky. Sometimes I was lonely during those summer days, but there was comfort in the routine.
A lot of teenagers aren't looking for the daily grind, though. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get out, to leave your childhood home. You wanted to progress, to make something of yourself.
Yeah, you're right. That house. I'm sure it's the same as how I left it. But then why does it feel so different?
I doubt you're the only adult to have looked back and asked that question.
Кто-нибудь вспомнит, где эти корни находились? Мы вообще должны не найти ничего. Что суть игры? Или послушать историю чувака. Его детства. Вот уже как 42 минута. Блин, а как я пропустил? В смысле? Что я пропустил? Кубики. На детских площадках видел. Ой, такие прям. И собираешь из них славу. Не только там, кстати, буквы, там еще и таблицу умножения можно сразу на детской площадке выучить. Не знаю, сейчас они есть или нет. У меня через квартал был такой, прям детская площадка с этим. Ну вот остался или нет? Вот там показывает тоже что-то белое. Нет? Ага, и по бокам вот специально. Да, в два места сбегай, ага. Что тебе стоит? Так, там будет 100 плодов лисенок, да? Вон там что-то есть. А, лисенок, это кассета, что-то послушать. Стоп. Я сейчас что-то увидел. Это волк? Я еще от волка тут буду,
The
да?
perpetrator stood nearby, unfazed.
А вот, кстати,
Like
лисенок,
nothing
а
was
вон там
wrong.
волк.
My dad is dead. And he's never coming back, Rachel. I can tell you these stories, but I can never reminisce with him again. He can never hold a grandchild that we'll probably never be able to have. I can never talk to him again,
Да,
and I'll
волк.
never be able to say I'm
Ничего,
sorry
нельзя к нему подходить, да?
for everything.
It was really important to me that the wolf in this story that takes the fox's
А, да,
cubs,
и сам иди
that
туда.
it wasn't explained at all.
Эх,
Like
ничего
it's
себе.
just this entity that's in the background. And of course it's supposed to represent something bigger than a wolf or even the fox. It's supposed to represent like the specter of death, and it comes when you least expect it. There's no justification. He's just there, always watching.
Стой. Там камушек. Все, да? Я тупо туда вниз буду стрелять. Да тут, блин, кувырком один раз уступиться. Ты так полетишь. А, чуть еле-еле. А эта игра вообще может в одну серию. Есть еще сохранение? Качество назад выйти. Эта игра в одну серию придется. В одну серию прям, да? Записать. Игра таймера запускать. Начали с зимы. Нет, наверное, все-таки осень. Лето. Чё? Нет, начали с весны. Или с зимы, что ли? Нет, сначала, наверное, все-таки весна, потом лето. Но я не скажу, что это осень. Два раза лето. Перепрыгнули сразу с зимы хопа. И мгновенно вставили. Зима, лето, потом может быть после лета сразу быть хопа, весна. Тут только одно место, да? И все. О, куда вы сумели? Там раскопка.
I need to go to bed. I just can't talk about this anymore.
Спокойной ночи. Ну, спокойной ночи.
Good night.
А, в смысле, good night. Теперь все? Просто молча побегай. Поищи лисенка еще одного. По-моему, он сказал их 3. Если через еще одну локацию будет, ну, плюс-минус 20 минут. Часовую серию я еще смогу, наверное, залить. Я не знаю, есть ли там у Ютуба какие-нибудь рамки. Ясно, ни весна, ни осень, ни лето, да? Сразу такие. Что нам стоит? Мы сразу сделаем
Joseph,
наводнение.
you can't go to sleep feeling like this. I'm sorry for everything, and I know you need space, but I'm here for you. You don't need to feel so lost. Joseph, have I ever told you what my mother was like?
Ой,
Hello, my name is Elise Whaley, and I was the voice actress for Rachel. I'm also David's wife. So that was convenient for working together. I was actually the voice actress for his first game, Home is Where One Starts, and I guess that I did a good enough job that David wanted me back, so I did the voice acting for this one as well. David definitely coached me through it because I'm pretty inexperienced when it comes to that. Home is Where One Starts was my first time ever doing voice acting of any kind. And we watched a lot of trailers of movies we liked to get the voice right of female leads who were talking in the trailer and try to mimic that and bring that into the game so that had the right kind of feel and the right kind of atmosphere for the voice. My character actually is the same character from Home is Where One Starts. If you've played that game, you probably connected that together. And this is her probably about 15 years later, maybe 20 years later in this game. I was happy to revisit the character of Rachel. We kind of leave her in an ambiguous spot in Home is Where One Starts. It definitely ends on a hopeful note, but there's not a lot of details. And in this game, you see that she's able to move on through a lot of her issues that she had from her abusive home and be able to start her own family and start a new cycle without that abuse, which I think is really inspiring.
You know what it's like not to have a mom at home. And you know how hard that made my childhood. What helped me was watching the birds in the morning before the school bus came. I thought that my mother was one of those birds. And it made me want to be free like her. My mom taught me how to fold origami cranes while she was in the hospital. So I told myself I would fold one every
специально,
day
да, так бегают?
until I could fly myself.
То именно прям у точки, то
I think we both
сюда
have
побеги,
always
туда
loved
побеги, но не
animals.
на точку
And
беги.
for me, that love started with a dog. Sometimes this Rottweiler would come up to our property line and wait at the fence for me, but only once in a while.
Чё это?
I was sure to check every
А,
day
сейчас тупо,
immediately
да?
after
Сюда
school,
подбеги.
and it
Ты
usually
офигел,
ended
что ли?
in disappointment. I would even steal money from my passed-out dad just so I could buy these
Я,
off-brand
конечно,
dog
извиняюсь.
biscuits. Even when she
Алиса
did
чё,
stop
в
by,
Иисуса
she never went
превратилась? Она
beyond the
просто так
fence.
по воде уже бегала,
Why was she so scared?
да? Зашибись.
So it's always interesting working with your spouse because, especially on a creative project, because they want your feedback, but it's something that's also dear to their heart, and they're dear to your heart, and you definitely don't want to hurt their feelings. So I was a little nervous when David asked me, he had finally finished writing the script, and he asked me to go over it and see what I thought. And I had minored in English. I majored in art, but I minored in English, so I felt like I had a little bit of experience. But I was definitely like a little scared because you don't want to be too harsh, but you also want to be honest. And it was the biggest relief when I read the script, and I was like, oh, good. My husband's a good writer. I don't have to change that much about this, just a few like grammatical things. And that was just like the biggest relief for me because it can be a tricky balance working with your spouse and making sure that that honesty is there, but also that love and the support is there as well.
I think my dad was the opposite of your dad in almost every way,
А, да?
except he was in the military as well.
Нет, не, не, не,
He
не,
coped with
не нажимайте,
alcohol
умоляю.
of every kind. The trailer started falling apart, he got angry, and I withdrew. More and more I became the weird, quiet kid who made lots of origami birds and carried dog biscuits around. I think we were pretty similar when it came to being the weird
Пил
kids.
всё, что горит.
And that same sincerity in college was one of the reasons I was so drawn to you. Life got worse and worse. And at one point, I really didn't think I could survive another day with my soul still intact. I had no real friends, let alone neighbors, since we lived in the middle of nowhere. I should have talked to my teacher, but I was scared what he would do if he found out. As I waited for the school bus one morning, I walked around until I found something in an abandoned
Что
shed.
можно в сарае
I can't
найти,
put into
чтобы не
words.
передать это словами?
So we're talking about Home is Where One Starts a lot. So if you haven't played that game, maybe this doesn't make as much sense, or maybe this is a little plug that you should go play it. But in that game, it actually features one of my artworks. I work as an artist
Тут она надолго,
and
эта игра.
paper cutting actually. And David used one of my artworks as a graffitied stencil in Home is Where One Starts that's against the wall of this shack. And it actually shows up again in the first tree, just a fragment of it. The first tree, the title actually comes from one of my artworks that I made back in 2015, I want to say. And I made this artwork while I was pregnant with our first child.
А, окей, спасибо.
And it had a lot of meaning for me, and David actually helped me come up with the title. And he asked, because I was really struggling, I was like, I have no idea what to call this, and I always go to David for title ideas and to bounce ideas off of him, and that's like the only way I can ever come up with a title is by talking with him. So we were talking back and forth and looking at this artwork, and he said, well, what kind of like movies or shows were you watching while you were making the artwork? Because my work's pretty tedious, so sometimes I'll watch a show or do some Netflix binging while I'm creating it. And I was like, oh, I actually watched Tree of Life a ton. And then we're like, Tree of Life. And we started thinking more about that and then arrived at the first tree. So it started off as one of my artworks and then became a part of David's art, which I think is really cool that we were able to share that title.
I summoned courage I didn't know I had, and I broke into my dad's.
Не дослушали. А,
The fox knew her last cub would be waiting
ну
for her
нафиг,
at the
подожди.
first tree. She was almost there. The rain cascaded onto the jade valley where the entrance to the tree was. Life was protected there, because that's where life began.
их ты.
It was now only a mother and a daughter left. Items from my life still dotted the ground as she moved closer to her destination. destiny.
Так, ладно. На этом я предлагаю сегодня закончить. Я не закрываю игру. Я прямо сейчас же продолжу снимать. Но выйдет эти серии в разных числах. Всем спасибо за просмотр.